Good morning and welcome to today's edition of Talking to Introverts. And we have something a little bit different today. But before we get to that, I'll introduce myself. I'm Denise Oliver. My business is Diva Empowerment. I'm all about empowering women to be the best that they can be in the world. And I have a specialist interest in grief and loss. So if you have experienced any form of adversity and are wondering how to be more adaptable with that, or you want to turn your pain into power or your wounds into wisdom, or all three of those, then you can find me at divaempowerment.com. And my co-host is here. Good morning, Sami Blackford.
Good morning, or good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Who knows? It's morning while we're recording this.
Yes. Can I say a bit about yourself?
Oh, sorry, forgot that bit. It's not like we do this regularly or anything. Hello. Yes, I'm Sami Blackford, and I am, I suppose, you would loosely call me a business coach, and I have a specialist interest in branding, both the strategy and the styling and design side. So I like to have a tangible plan and also make things look pretty. I help introverted women, mostly some men, to make their mark out in the world with their businesses without flogging themselves on social media. So yes, if you would like to know more, you can find me at sammyrainbow.co.uk. And as ever, all these links are in the description.
Yeah, Canva is one of your best friends.
I love Canva.
Yes, she's in a relationship with Canva. So I said today was a little bit different, and that difference today is that we have a guest with us, and our guest is Jess Wilkins-Cook. Marvellous name. I love it. Good morning, Jess.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
And how are you?
Really well. Lovely to see you as always.
And Jess, you have a podcast of your own, don't you? And you are now the guest in a podcast instead.
I know, it's very strange, actually. It's very different.
Don't worry, we'll look after you. And anything that you're uncomfortable with, just say so, and we'll skip over it. It won't be a problem at all. But for all of us who are recording this, just sit back, relax, let the chair support you as we fire questions at Jess. We are very chatty, Jess. It's not about all facts and things like that. So just anything that you want to raise it. We'll discuss it with you. So
we love a tangent.
Oh,
I love a tangent.
I mean, I don't think we could do a recording without one. So let's see how this goes. So first of all, Jess, as we're talking to introverts, I'd like to know from you what your life as an introvert is like. How would you describe being an introvert?
I would say it's got a bit easier, actually, because it took me quite a long time to recognise that I was an introvert, because I love I suppose places that are associated with extroversion. So I really enjoy a big family gathering, but it took me a really long time to notice that there's a cost to that, and I need to put back in, or I need to prepare for that and then balance afterwards. So it took me a really long time to work out why I was feeling tired all the time, why I was feeling overwhelmed. I love people. I work with people, and so it was strange to me sometimes that I felt that urge to be on my own. So it was a really a bit of a journey, really. But yeah, it's got a bit easier now. So I find it a bit easier to say no to things, and people around me recognise that that's not something to be taken personally. New Year's a great example, because it's when your life's busy, isn't it? I've got two and a 3-year-old, and a business. And so it's busy, and Christmas time is a quite an intense time, I think, if you're an introvert, or it can be. So I tend to do Christmas, big family Christmas. And then like this year, my husband and my children went to the big family party for New Year, and I went on a silent meditation retreat. So I think you've got to work out what it is for you, haven't you?
Where did you go on your retreat? I like the sound of that.
Usually it's over a few days, and it's in North Wales in a beautiful house in Penmaenmawr called Nodfa. But this year, actually, she did it online. She's quite an introvert as well. She did it online, and we all said it was wonderful because you met up for your meditations and then you were just at home. How often are we really, really still at home? Well, it's rarely still here with the cats and the chickens and the kids. So it was lovely, actually. It was really nice.
I really like the sound of that. Yeah. Sami, anything from you?
I'm already on the silent retreat. I'm like, I'd like to be there, please. And I think it's true what you say, Jess. Like, it's a journey, and like I've been in that place where I've done I'm going to use the phrase keeping up with the Joneses. It feels like, you got to be out and doing this and that and the other. And like, why am I so exhausted all the time? Because I've been go, go, go and not, as you say, like putting back into myself. So yeah, fully can understand that.
My New Year's Eve was spent with our little Jessie dog. So it was almost a silent retreat. I wasn't at home, I was at my daughter's, and we just sat around from midday on New Year's Eve until she did her big walk at 8 o'clock the following morning. Just quick whizzes outside to have a quick wee, and then we were back in, and we just really enjoyed ourselves just being quiet together. So sort of like you, but not quite.
Animals are medicine, aren't they, as well, for it?
Amazing.
You guys have got dogs,
amazing.
haven't you? I've got cats, and it's I never feel like that about my cats. I never feel like I need to shut the door on my cats.
Yeah. Yeah. Although, Sami, you've got one that does lash out occasionally, doesn't? Yeah.
Yeah. She's not today, she's quite often part of the podcast recording because she has to be on my knee, but then gets a bit grumpy. But she's not with us today.
Jess, tell us a bit about yourself. Where do you hail from? Where are you now? And a bit about your business.
I'm in Chester, not too far from Manchester and Liverpool, but as an introvert, I spend most time in Little Chester. And yeah, as I said, we've got a busy young family, 2 little ones, lots of animals, and I retrained while I was on mat leave. My children are adopted, so I had kind of back-to-back mat leaves as they came home. And I retrained, and I'm an EFT practitioner, which is one of the best decisions that I've ever made. I adore what I do. EFT, if you've not heard of it, you might know it as tapping, is a somatic therapy, and it helps us to access those things that thinking and talking can't quite access because they're unconscious, our limiting beliefs, which we all have, which we all learn, and which we can't help but act from, really. So I came to EFT as a client originally, and it was absolutely transformational for me. So I get to share that with people now, and I specialize in working with parents and adoptive parents to connect with themselves. It can be quite easy to get lost in parenthood, and to connect with their children as well and make family life a little bit easier. So I work online, and very newly, I also work in person in Chester. So Ooh. Yes, I'm very, very exciting. But yeah, I'm fairly new to business, as you both know, but it's been the best change I've ever made in my life.
So where in Chester are you based? Where are you going to be seeing people?
I'm going to be seeing people at Lifestyle Holistic Therapy, which is in Upton in Chester. So it's a lovely place. Again, a place that I went to first as a client. So I know that it's got lovely atmosphere and energy. So I'm really looking forward to moving into in-person. Online sessions, I think, are amazing. Yeah. But it's not everybody's preference. So I'm excited to be able to move into that.
Just tell us a little bit about EFT itself. How has it started? Where did it come from? How long has it been around? That sort of thing.
It's pretty young, actually. It kind of started as an amalgamation of other therapies. And it was Gary Craig who started EFT, who was an engineer, I believe, and who whose books are well worth reading. So I would say if anybody who's interested in EFT, grab the EFT manual. So it's probably a little bit out of date now because I think he's released another one quite recently, which I'm sure is fantastic, but I haven't got around to reading yet, so I couldn't recommend. But the EFT manual is really small, really readable, really practical. Sometimes with these kind of books, you expect them to be quite dense, but the amazing thing about Gary Craig is that he wants EFT to be accessible, because it came out of a lot of other therapies that are a bit more complex, and EFT is about making it accessible because it's a therapeutic tool which we can use to dive a lot deeper into an issue that somebody's having a challenge, but it's also something that you can do for yourself. So from your first session, you'll be able to use EFT in your own life, and it's clinically proven to take down anxiety, stress. There's a lot of work been done with PTSD, with veterans. So it's got an amazing evidence base. And for that, I would recommend Dr. Peter Stapleton and The Science Behind Tapping. Again, really interesting, really, really readable book. But yes, it's an amazing tool, however you choose to use it. But I particularly love the fact that it's empowering. So I think it's really different sometimes for people and really refreshing that I would never sit in front of a client and assume that I knew really anything about them, or certainly what their answers were. Everything comes from you. It's almost like your practitioner is a bit of a guide into those answers for yourself. And that's a beautiful thing.
It really is, isn't it? I find it fascinating how we are literally guiding that person, because we all know everything. It's just that we've forgotten how to access it, is how I describe it. It's how I see it happening. And I think the person who is receiving the treatment, when they're sat in front of someone like yourself, Jess, or someone like myself, or any other therapist, any other modality, you literally see them light up. They just go, oh, like, what a surprise. And it's like, yeah, no, you know everything. And I'm really glad to have been here to support you as you uncover that. What sort of things you particularly are talking about working with parents? What are the issues that they come to you with? Can you give us a general overview of that?
Can I jump in before we get onto that? Sorry.
Yeah, go.
I think as well, it's like the connecting the dots, isn't it? Or helping the client connect the dots, isn't it? Because like it wasn't an EFT practitioner, but I remember talking to somebody years ago and just happened to mention that I hate using the telephone. And he was like, well, have you got any, like, when you were a child or anything, any memories of something terrible happened with the telephone? I was like, not really. The only thing I can think of is like one time my grandma, who lived in Liverpool when we lived in North Wales, she'd phoned and she'd knitted some clothes from one of my dolls. So wanted to talk to me on the phone, and asked me, if the clothes fitted and did I like them and all of this. And I nodded. And like my mum and dad both laughed, like, she can't see you, you have to speak. And like, to me, that's not a terrible thing that happened, but it's the only memory I have of using the telephone as a child. And he was like, well, if it's the memory that stuck with you, that's got to be something. And I was like, oh. And I think sometimes it's having somebody to help you connect those dots that can be really helpful. And I suppose, like, in both of your modalities, that's what you do for people, isn't it?
Yeah, which you do with what the strategies that you have to help people as well. So we're all doing similar things, just with different coaching methods. I love it. Go, Jess.
I think that was such a perfect example, actually, because you had a memory, or have a memory, and you've got something that maybe you just live with. I don't like using the phone. I do it when I have to. And so we've all got those things, haven't we? So I think people come to something like this when they get to a point when they're when that balance it's too difficult, actually. It's really causing me a problem. And that memory is a perfect example, because you can't consciously, from the surface, tell us what you believed on that day or what it made you feel, or it doesn't really seem significant, but it's familiar. That's something that you remember, that you remember. And that is how I ended up working with parents. I had a similar memory of my mum when I was a kid, but it didn't feel very emotionally charged. But it came up when I went to an EFT practitioner about struggling to connect with my daughter. And I thought, there's nothing behind this. I'm very familiar with this memory, but there absolutely was behind that. And I would have laughed if you'd have told me at the time. Behind that was the belief that mothers and daughters don't have healthy, happy relationships. So for that reason, I had no idea, but I was able to uncover that in EFT. So for that reason, I was kind of quite disconnected from my daughter. And that was because I was protecting myself unconsciously from a relationship that was inevitably going to break down. When I was able to uncover that, I was able to completely change that pattern of thinking and emotion. But I couldn't have done that by talking about it. And it's almost like that memory or the piece of it that you have is a door. And we can leave the door closed until, like it was with my daughter, I had to open it because I had to change what was happening. And I knew enough to know to look at me and not at her, which is always the way, isn't it, to look inside. But I'd say that's a good example of where there'd be something behind it, purely because you will have used the phone hundreds of times as a child, but that's the one you remember. So it's really interesting. And you can leave it, it closed, as we all can with all the many things we all have, unless you wanted to change the dislike of using the phone.
Did you change it, Sami?
I didn't, because it wasn't really the conversation we were having at the time. I didn't at that time, and I haven't really consciously looked at it, but I know using the phone has become easier. It's still not my favorite thing. And I think that might be like more of an introvert thing as well. Like somebody phones me, I'm like, don't phone me, message me. This is my space. Don't come into my space. But it is something that like I'm now more aware of and where it could have come from.
And it's not as simple as kind of one thing to, as you say, there'll be things of I just don't like using it, or I'm an introvert, or it's just an example. But like, so there's lots of things that kind of amalgamate to create. I've got an issue around driving, and there's lots of reasons for that. Some of it is just that those aren't the skills that are most natural to me. Anything mechanical falls apart in my hands, so it's not my kind of forte. But there's an anxiety there that I can tap on. I know I can, because while I might not always enjoy it or be as adept at it as my husband is, there's probably things I can improve. And it's whether you choose to, isn't it? It's whether that balance is, oh, actually, I can just live with this. Or, but it's lovely if ever we do find something like I did with my daughter, where you think, I don't know what is going on. I don't know why I feel like this. There are a set of tools, there are places we can go. And that is a beautiful thing, especially if you've been through trauma or you've suffered with long-term anxiety or anything like that. So for parents, a lot of the time, they are in contentious relationships or having real challenges connecting and coming together with their kids, whether they're young or older. And really, a lot of the time, some of that will be around what we learned as kids, but we just won't be aware of it. And it's so difficult. It's the most important relationships in our life. Same with partners, it can happen, any relationship really. And you're in a kind of a lock or a difficult place, or there's a lot of conflict and you don't know why, and you don't know how to change it. Or you're in conflict with yourself. Really, anxiety can feel like that a lot of the time. Stuck in a loop, and you feel like you've tried everything. You've done all the practical things you can think of. You've Googled it hundreds of times. You've spoken to people, and you might even know, well, it's probably because of this, or it might be because this happened to me, but I can't connect the threads. Beautiful thing is you don't have to. It's like you were saying, Denise, it's a different language. We're taught the language of the mind, which is great for problem solving and all the things it's there to do. It does an amazing job, but the body has a different language, and we just don't speak it. We're not taught. So yeah, tap in, and obviously lots of other similar modalities, really, really simple tools to access that language. And then you don't have to think your way out. You don't have to analyze it. Your body can lead you to those changes.
Oh, I tell you what, if every problem could be solved with analytics and thinking and logic, it's like, I'd be king of the world by now.
Yeah, well, do you want to therapize this person over here? I think you might need a session with Jess, to be honest. Yeah, you do have quite the brain, and I'm so grateful for your brain, but I also understand how you overuse it and forget about your body in the process.
It is quite a, I don't know, I'm going to say it's quite a common thing that people are so out of touch with their bodies now. I went to a belly dancing class the other day, and
amazing. I've always wanted to do that, and I've not been brave enough.
I have no coordination whatsoever.
Me too.
My body does not do what my brain tells it to do. And like, I can see the teacher there in front of me, like, so easy. Like, you just move this part of your body. No, not your hips, just this part, not your hips. I'm like, I'm not moving my hips. Oh, I'm moving my hips. Oh, okay, I didn't realize. It's just like, I have such a disconnect between like what goes on in my head and what the rest of my body does. From what you're saying, I kind of get that EFT helps to kind of reconnect those things. Is that right?
Yeah, but really simply, I don't think I had the connection in my body until kind of at least my late 20s, and it's really normal, like you say, or it might have come from experiences that we've had, or just that we haven't been taught to speak that language. But it's really simple in that we kind of all know that when we have an emotion, usually it's connected to a thought, or, you know, we can hear, if we're feeling angry, we can hear the story happening in our mind as well. There's also a corresponding sensation in the body. How do you know you feel angry? If I had a colour, what colour would it be? And just trust in that, because the mind then goes, well, don't listen to that. Listen to me. Listen to the words. But actually, is it fizzy? Is it heavy? Is it hot? And everybody's feelings will show up differently, but that's as simple as it begins. So as much as when you're feeling happy, you can hear that you're feeling happy because you've had this achievement or because this has happened. Actually, you can feel that in the body as well. Is it warm? Where is it? Is it in your heart? Is it in your arms? Is it? And that's it. That's where we begin with EFT. And those are the doors that we can open to find that kind of other half of the story that we just don't hear.
Yeah, one of the things that when I did the nutritional healing training way back 20 years ago, there was just one phrase that came up time and time again from the tutors: you are not cut off at the neck. You know, this whole thing of we're so up here all the time. It's like our heads are way bigger than they actually are. And we put so much importance on our thoughts that we just completely ignore what goes on below shoulder line. And it's like they're two separate things. And I've begun to talk more about brain health, because it's like we forget the brain needs to be looked after, the physical thing that is that spongy thing inside the skull. You know, if you have a heart problem, you look after your heart, but we don't consider the brain in the same way. The brain goes off into the more of the mental health. No one thinks about the physical health of the brain. It's not really being looked at. And I have this now, it's getting bigger and bigger, this thing that we all need to be considering our brain health way more than we do. And obviously that then, the way that we can do that is to connect it to what goes on inside our body through our digestive health. Because without good digestive health, you don't have a healthy body, full stop. But gut health and brain health are so connected, and there's so much research happening now about that. You get butterflies in your tummy, all that sort of thing, and actually that's the feeling, but what's associated with that sensation that you're experiencing. And we often want to keep them very, very separate. We don't want to think about what's going on in our body. We don't want to consider what it is to have a healthy brain. somehow we can't make the connection, like you said, Sami. The dots aren't being connected, and yeah, that's what we're all doing. We're helping everyone. We're helping the people that come to us to join the dots in whatever way we can. I did EFT. I did the Gary Craig course, and I'd completely forgotten until you said it. Just like it had gone out of my mind. And I can remember doing my training, and there we all were in a room, and by lunchtime we've all got these red marks on our face from all the tapping that we've been doing all day long. And it was just like, oh my goodness, look at us. We're part of this group over here. We've got the red dotty face. You haven't. And I think when you first start doing tapping, it's one of those things that you'd sort of like tap too hard. So you make a physical mark, and you don't need to be doing it that energetically, shall we say. So what happens from starting tapping? What happens to the body? Is there now science that talks about what is changing in the body?
There is, and it's interesting because Gary Craig wasn't that kind of, he said, I'll leave the science to other people. In his book, the chapter is written by somebody else, because he's like, I know this works. And he would say that it's similar to it uses similar points to acupuncture. So we often hear it called acupuncture without the needles. And it's a similar premise to acupuncture in that there's the idea that there's energy channels in the body, and the natural state of the body is wellness. So it's really interesting. We do measure, say, for example, somebody comes in feeling anxious. We would measure that using a simple number scale. We do that for a few reasons, but one of them is because if they sit down and they call that a 10 and they tap and then it's a 4, unless you put the number on it, they might not know that there's a change, because it's such a natural release. And the body will do what it needs to do. One of the most common side effects of tapping, which you have to remember to tell people because they feel really rude, is yawning. Big, big kind of continuous yawning. And it's just the body's way of releasing. But Dr. Peter Stapleton is the person to look to for the science. So she's measuring cortisol, which is significantly reduced after really brief rounds of tapping, actually. There's an awful lot of clinical research, and she will say that tapping is communicating with the amygdala. So it's communicating with the threat system in the body, and it's allowing us to release those difficult emotions. And the kind of counterproductive thing about tapping, we use a bit of language. So in its simplest form, if you came with anxiety, we might tap and we might say anxiety, anxiety. And people go, why? Why would you say anxiety? If you're feeling anxious, surely you want to be saying peace. That's the mind speaking, because we're not telling the body what to do with the mind. We are opening to what's actually happening. Because if I start tapping for calm when I'm really anxious, then I am putting another layer of resistance onto what my experience is right now. But instead, I'll find that if I lean into that experience, it's a really human thing not to want to do that. But then we can end up with lots of doors that we're pushing ourselves against that are banging and trying to open. And then our whole life is about keeping those doors closed, which was my experience when I was suffering with really bad anxiety. Instead, if we actually lean into that, which is counterintuitive, we can allow the body to feel safe in that moment, to let those emotions pass. They say, don't they, that emotions are energy in motion. And what we do with EFT is we allow the motion to return where it's become stuck.
Yeah, one of the ways that we talk about it, sorry, Sami, you can have your moment in a moment.
Okay.
Otherwise I'll forget. Is that we always say, I use the havening technique, which has come out of EFT. It was actually, that's how havening started. And that's a long story, which I won't tell right now, is that never lie to your brain. Your brain is telling you you're anxious. If you go straight into tapping on calm, your brain goes, no, you're not calm. No, we're not feeling calm. We're anxious. And it just builds the anxiety because you're attempting to do something that you can't yet. You have to start promoting the calmness before you actually start talking about it. And the way to promote it is to actually acknowledge the anxiety in the first place. So once the brain comes on board with going, oh, not lying to me, you understand me, you get me, yeah, we're anxious right now. Okay, cool. Okay, we've got that. So now what do we do? Oh, shall we try calmness then? All right, let's give it a go. And it's that playing with it and making almost fun out of the situation. But we always say in Havening, never lie to the brain. And it's why I now recognise that years ago, when Louise Hay came into being with affirmations didn't work for me. I was lying to my brain. It wasn't ready to hear them. You have to smile at yourself in the mirror and tell yourself how beautiful you are. I am beautiful. And I just hear a voice like, yeah, right, of course you are. And it was just like, it was a lie to my brain because I'd been putting myself down and doubting myself and so full of imposter syndrome for so long. It didn't know any other state to be in. It couldn't think that I was beautiful and that my smile was wonderful and all of that. It just couldn't do it, which I now understand. And so if you're in a position like that, then yeah, get in touch with Jess. EFT's a wonderful, wonderful modality for, like you say, you can have sessions and then you can do it on your own, can't you? You can actually just keep practicing and practicing and practicing and showing your brain that there is another way to live. And it doesn't have to all be about threat and survival. I mean, our amygdala has an awful lot of control over what goes on, our thoughts, how we then choose to interpret those thoughts, the stories we create, over the beliefs that we have unconsciously. We are fascinating, aren't we? I do love a topic like this. Sami.
Well, I was going to kind of come on to a similar sort of thing, really, because so often or what has been the case in recent years, I think it's starting to change now, is like in the wellness sphere, it's like, just think positive. So you wouldn't think, oh, I'm anxious. You think, I'm really calm, I'm really peaceful, I'm really relaxed, whatever words work for you. And I think it's quite interesting that actually now it's coming more to no, we have to acknowledge where we are right now before we can, do anything about it. And like you were saying, Denise, that just be positive can feel very fake, very untruthful. And there's a lot of it in like the wellness sphere. And I know what little of NLP I've done, like how you use language and all of that, has a lot of that in it as well. And I'm guessing this is where like the whole thing around toxic positivity has come from as well, as in you can't just BS your brain, you can't BS your body, it is what it is and it needs to, be acknowledged before it can be moved.
And I think all of that matters, doesn't it? All of that, how, like you say with NLP, how we use language, how like we are giving ourselves messages all the time, but the acknowledgement, like you say, is the key. Because once we've come, because it's we hear the affirmation debate quite a lot, and I never used to like affirmations, but actually now I enjoy affirmations and I tap with them. But as you say, that's because I've done enough work that it doesn't feel like a lie anymore. Or if it does, that's my cue to go, okay, well, actually, how does that feel in my body? And then that's what to tap with. But once we come to a place of neutrality, which if we give the body an opportunity, it will do, then we can start to invite in more good things. We can consciously invite more in, but we can't, there's very little point, as you said, Sami, in toxic positivity, which I think, and I especially talk about this a lot when I'm talking about motherhood, and it happens a lot in spaces where we're not really given permission to tell the whole story, and it actually makes the harder things much harder. Because if you had a hard morning, it could have been left there in the morning. If you had a hard morning, then you beat yourself up that you found it hard, you'd be thinking about that all week. So it's that, and we just go, okay, this is what's here. And remembering it's not a choice. When, for example, I was in anxiety, my body had learned, oh, this is a trigger, and this is a trigger, and this is a trigger. And they were things that because I didn't understand, I couldn't understand that message. I was just stuck in those loops. But actually, that trigger is a message to me. And instead of me going, oh, why is my mind not doing what I want it to do? Why do I feel frightened all the time? Why has my world become so small? Because I'm afraid to step out. Actually, I've got the tool now where I can start to have that conversation with my body, and it will answer me. And together we can figure it out, because it's saying, oh, this is danger, let me protect you. And I'm saying, no, I don't want that. I'm going to push through. But I'm doing that toxic positivity thing by doing that, where I haven't actually listened. I haven't actually understood what's behind the message. So actually, it's a shorter and easier conversation. Although it might be uncomfortable to lean into those emotions, whether we do or we don't, they're there until we lean into them. So you got to feel out what the right time is for you. Anybody who's thinking about doing it, everybody's different, and it's your gut. As we say, is another reference to connecting with your body, is your gut feeling. But it's your gut when it's right. But there are ways out of those loops. We can begin to feel really, really helpless. But it's not because there's anything wrong with us, really. Most of the time, it's just because we just don't have the right language.
Interesting, isn't it, that we talk so much in society as it is through social media, not necessarily on the phone anymore. We don't even have to literally speak, but there's always a language running through us. There's always sound, there's always voices. It's very difficult to go completely quiet, even in your own brain. And yet we don't have a language, or we're not taught in this society a language that does help us. We do have to go to someone who has a modality like you do with EFT, Jess, like I do with Havening, that helps to teach us a different way with the words that come out of our mouth and the words that we hear in our head. I read a lot about nonviolent communication many, many years ago that helped me understand what passive aggressiveness was. Not something that I recognised that I did, but I did. And it was a defence mechanism. And so once I read through what nonviolent, I didn't go on a course or anything because they were in America at the time, but reading the books on nonviolent communication, I was like, oh, okay. And it seemed like to me, I needed to use a lot more words rather than just simple, well, can't you just get it done? Type of, very to the point, very blunt. But actually we have a need to have a language that's way kinder and gentler, more caressing in a way for everyone. Words are often, our hearing is one of the things that you talked about, our amygdala picks up on. The things that are heard are things that the amygdala will retain and will build on. So Sami, you with your non-telephone conversation on your part, there was something that was said that your amygdala retained and created, going down the line, something else that was a story that had a belief behind it. There's so much, we are just so amazing, aren't we? And I take my hat off to the people who notice all this stuff that's going on with us and then create these wonderful modalities where we can go and learn so much more about how to be at peace with ourselves and be kinder to ourselves, which then radiates out to the people that we know. And whether they pick up on that or not, that's their choice. But you've chosen as an individual to do something about how you feel. And I applaud everyone who shows up, because it's tough. It's really tough to actually go, I feel like shit right now, and I don't know why. Can you help me? But I know I'm not okay, and I know I'm not functioning in a way that I'd like to. So, big pats on our backs, I think.
Before we go any further, I just want to interject a little advert break. Jess, tell us where people can find you.
So you can find me on my website, which is breatheasymeditation.co.uk. I love sharing EFT, and I know that it can be, as Denise said, quite a commitment to think about coming to see somebody. So I offer a free half-an-hour consultation where we can have a chat about whatever it is that is feeling like a challenge for you, there's absolutely no obligation and no sales in these calls. I really just want to tell you what EFT is, and then you can choose to do whatever you want with that. After your first session, you'll be able to use EFT for yourself. So I can teach you EFT fairly simply. We can give you some personalized scripts to work through in the meantime as well, so you don't have to rely on waiting for a session. I work with people mainly one-to-one, and if you are interested in joining our Not a Perfect Parent community, we also have a podcast. Then you'll find it all on the website as well.
And in the description below. We'll put all links.
And come and see us at Storyhouse Women. We're doing an introduction to EFT for anxiety.
When is that, Jess?
March the 2nd.
I do like that there's you offer a free call beforehand, because something like this, like if people have never experienced it before, it can be like, what is that? Do I want that? Will that help? So yeah, I think that's quite...
I know one thing that hasn't been said. What does EFT stand for?
Oh, it's emotional freedom technique. And I don't think I've actually said what it is. So it literally is, we use talking as it's used in talking therapy, we talk about the issue often, although if there's something that you really don't want to talk about, you can still use EFT with it. And it's simple tapping on non-invasive points on the body. Some practitioners will tap on you if you would like that. Generally, I ask you to tap for yourself, because that gives you the ability to do it when I'm not there. And it is as simple as that, really, but incredibly powerful.
Is there, because as you've been talking, like, I have actually been to a taster session of EFT, and I remember we were sat in a circle and the practitioner, I can't remember what we tapped on now, but the practitioner was doing her thing and we were all tapping, and it was interesting what you were saying about it being energy in motion, because by the end of it, there was a lot of yawning and there was a few people crying, and they were kind of like, I don't know why I'm crying. And the practitioner's like, no, it's fine. It's just, release of energy or whatever's stuck. But I was wondering, is there a part of, because you mentioned it being linked to acupuncture or acupressure, is there a part of distracting the brain with the tapping? Because I find that it's just a really weird sensation. It's like, why am I tapping this bit and what this bit? What are we doing? Like, I get that it's now that you've said, like, goes with the meridians and all of that. But is there that thing? Because I know in havening, Denise, you talk about distracting the brain a lot. So is there that in EFT as well?
I don't think so. I think, and it can be a really weird sensation and really common to cry and to, but again, not necessarily feeling upset. It's like yawning. Some people enthusiastically burp. It's all allowed, because it's just the body kind of moving and temperature changes, things like that. But distracting the brain, Denise might have something to say on this, but it's not something I've kind of heard around EFT.
Yeah, we use the word distractions in havening technique. It's only a part of the modality. The distraction is to bring the amygdala on board in a more positive way, because our amygdala is our survival part of our brain. And in havening, we call our amygdala Amy, A-M-Y, the first three letters of amygdala. So I'll talk about Amy. So Amy is a very small part of our overall brain. Amy has been with us for millions and millions of years, and she's still seen as very important by the brain as a whole. Amy is where anything to do with our survival is stored. She might be small, but by golly, she's incredibly powerful. And this is where you might have heard the term negativity bias. This is where it lives. And in order to survive, as we would have done back in caveman days with T-Rex wandering around, forget bears, think massive prehistoric animals, we needed that negativity to assess our environment. We had to be sure that we could leave our cave safely to get our food and return. We don't need that in the same way these days, but Amy is still triggered. She's triggered hugely by so many things. Now she thinks she's she's there keeping you safe. That's what her whole raison d'etre is about. This is her job. She's done it for millions of years. So what we do is we take, this has all been proven through neuroscience and neurobiology. We have a conversation with Amy, and we bring her down. We use that point scoring, the measuring, like you talked about, Jess, so that as individuals, we're like, I'm at a 10. Oh my God, it's so real right now, whatever the incident might have been. And we use her language, which is sight, sound, smell, taste, and touch. And instead of dwelling on the negativity side of her language, we show her that there's a positive side. So we use games to bring her on board. We don't lie to her. We want to get her attention, and we want to calm her down so that we can see that there's another way to live in this world. She's still there. You need her. There's a certain aspect of when it's dark, she needs to be on higher alert because the dark is dangerous. When you got to walk a dog in the dark, like I walk Jess around, and she's tracking for danger. She checks when she goes for a walk at night, for a last wee walk, that everything's safe. And we do the same, but not to the degree that a dog will, because we have a different part of our brain that's only thousands of years old, and that's the prefrontal cortex. And this is the part that we're attempting to bring on board as well as we are calming Amy down and bringing more positivity into the process. We want our prefrontal cortex to come on board as well. This is where our wisdom is. And this has all been proven through neuroscience. The brain lights up in different ways in different areas with different stimuli. So distraction is used in a positive way. And it's used to bring calmness into the body, to bring Amy down off high alert, which is her natural thing to do. So that's what distraction is in havening. It's not, we use havening touch, EFT uses touch. The touch itself, from my understanding, is changing the electrical currents that are being used in the body. And that tapping or the havening touch is creating a different electrical current that helps to de-stress the body. So a lot of the time we're using the electrical current of gamma waves. So when I say electrical current, it's not like, it is like electricity. We do have something similar to electricity running through our body, but it happens in different wavelengths. So alpha waves, beta waves. In havening, we're accessing delta waves, which are very slow rolling, calming waves in the body. And delta waves are like getting a genuine hug from someone who really cares about you. Except when we're using the havening touch, you're caring for yourself in a really kind, considerate, gentle way. And then we bring in the distractions to just bring Amy down off her, especially like trauma, stress, PTSD, high emotional pain experiences. If you've never been taught how to, like, say, do deep breathing and meditation, been to a yoga class and found that useful, you don't have any tools. EFT is an amazing tool to bring a sense of safety into the body so that Amy's not triggering you all the time. Same with havening. It's that it brings you back into your body and brings a sense of safety that you may never have experienced. It depends on the type of upbringing and lifestyle you've had. Some of our experiences have happened before we even have memories of them. But Amy knows. That's the thing. We don't have thinking memories. We may not have pictures as such or hear certain things. But Amy's developing in the 3rd trimester of pregnancy. And that's the weeks before you're born. So she's picking up any stress that your mother's going through, and through genetics, the stress that your grandmother's gone through as well. So anything that's happened in previous lifetimes can create within your body something you don't even know is a problem until you start living your life and you want to go to do something. So it might be like getting on a plane. might be like driving a car, and suddenly you just find you just can't do it. That's when it's worth going to speak to someone like Jess or like myself and going, I have this problem, but I don't know where it's come from. So like Sami, it's like you with your telephone. The only memory I've got is this. Okay, but I bet there's more underneath that. And it's just, we just don't get the impact at times that what is almost a laughable, I'm going to put it in inverted commas, a laughable trauma. It's like, why is that a problem? That's ridiculous. I should be over this by now. That's your thinking brain. That's you trying to think your way out of it. But actually, The Body Keeps the Score, which is an amazing book. And Amy will keep, she goes to a part of your brain called working memory. And working memory is like you going to your phone to Google something. She goes and checks in with working memory. Well, how many times have we done this and what's similar to this? And she lumps it all together, and suddenly you can't get behind the wheel of a car. You find you can't walk towards the plane, no matter how much you tell yourself, this is ridiculous, it's irrational. I know that this is okay. I can look at all the data and I can do all the analysis, but I still can't get behind the wheel of a car or on a bike or whatever, cross a bridge. Some people can't walk across bridges. That is an amygdala response. Actually, it's a very good thing to be worried about crossing bridges, but rationally, you know that millions of people have crossed this bridge or wherever you are. There are so many things we have phobias about and fears about. And actually understanding what the brain is doing is part of the process of bringing yourself down from stress alert. Doing it with someone else who can see you, who can ask you questions that you can't ask yourself, is such a gift, I believe. I've ranted enough. Your turn.
Put your soapbox away, Denise.
I'm off it. I sat down. You did ask.
Well, kind of following on from what Denise has just been saying, Jess, do you need to know where these things come from? Like what the cause is? Kind of like me with my telephone memory from when I was a child. Do you need to know? Do you need to find out where they come from? Or can you, I'm going to say, solve the problem? Not saying you're solving people or curing people. We have to watch our language as practitioners. But can you, in inverted commas, solve the problem without knowing the origin?
Yeah, and I feel like we're picking on this phone story, but it's the same as me with my daughter. I knew I had that memory, and the memory is, if I could share it, it's my mum had quite a severe mental health illness that was periodic, and I must have been about 4, and because I was on my own in the house with her, and she came up the stairs, but she was angry with me, and she was angry with me because she was telling me that I needed to do something, but she was doing it telepathically, she believed. And so for her, it was like she'd asked me to do something 50 times and I had ignored her. So one of the beliefs that I made on that day, which I accessed in EFT and wasn't aware of, was I'm causing trouble. I'm trouble. I'm on my own, in my room. I haven't spoken to anybody. I've created a problem. I did not realize that was the belief. But what that is, that memory for me was a doorway, because it's more complex than that one memory. So all I knew, I started with, I'm irritable with my daughter. I feel withdrawn. I find it hard to make a connection. I feel, and to me, it feels like her behavior is challenging. I knew that there was something else, but for a lot of us, and had I not found EFT, I could have just thought my daughter has challenging behavior. But actually, like anything, the only thing I can control, the only thing I can change, the only thing I can look at all, if I cannot change my circumstances, I can change the way that I feel. It has to start with me. And I think it's really important to say everyone needs a practitioner. I knew it was deep enough that I would, although I use EFT for myself a lot, and there's something called the personal peace process that Gary Craig kind of puts. So we put everything that bothers you, from niggles to big things, pop it on a list, tap 5 minutes every day, pick something else every day. You're really going to make big changes. I knew that I could chip away at this, but I needed guidance, because where something's really painful, our bodies create lots of different resistances. And so, for example, you might feel really restless every time somebody wants to talk about something. You just get up and do something else, make sure you're busy. And it's these subtle ways that we resist looking at these difficult things, looking in these doors, that mean if something's difficult to look at, that we just can't get there on our own. And also, I would always say, when you're looking at something much bigger, or you start to realize it's much bigger, it's much, much safer to talk to a practitioner, be guided, whether you're a practitioner or not, to be guided and taken through that. So no, you absolutely don't need to know. I didn't know that memory had anything to do with it. And it could be something completely unrelated. The phone thing that you said is related to using the phone directly, but often it's something that you would think has no connection at all. So in session, we often have to say what's come up, and people go, oh, nothing. But you can tell something has, and you go, well, what's come up? And they go, oh, it's got nothing to do with it. I don't know why. And it's like, well, it might actually, because what we're looking for is the feeling. And so I created the belief, I'm trouble. So, but I had no idea. I was a child. Also, it's worth saying, I can't rationalize that because I don't have an adult mind now. So I can't see with the eyes of a 4-year-old child. So it might not ever make any sense to me, these beliefs that I make, but that acts as a tabletop. And then something that we do as we go through life, which doesn't always serve us, but is an attempt to serve us, is we look for anything that evidences our beliefs. We're Velcro for once we've made the belief, we're Velcro for anything that supports it, and Teflon for anything that doesn't. So I would have gone through my life seeking evidence and kind of self-sabotaging to create evidence that I am trouble, I am a problem. And so those events that support that belief will act as the table legs. So we can access any of these things in EFT. So that event might have been a table leg. It might not have even been, I might have used it to support that belief when I created it. Or the lovely thing is I don't have to work it out. I don't have to have a chronology. I don't have to understand. But as I start to work through, and I say work through, our job really in somatic therapy is to open the space for the body to do the natural processes of allowing that energy to move through as it might have done on the day but didn't. And so it got stuck. And then we start taking off those table legs. So if you take off enough table legs, or you chip away enough, you're going to collapse that belief. Once you collapse that belief, if I have a belief that I cause trouble wherever I am, and it's unconscious, I've got no idea. I always say it's like foundations of a house. We can't see it, but we can see the brickwork, we can see the paint, we can see the windows, but all of those depend completely on the foundations. We don't know what they are, we can't see them, but they matter. And they can't help but affect the stability and how the rest of our house is. So if I have that belief, I cause trouble, I cause trouble for other people, and I'm trying to start a business, how am I going to show up in that? And I might think, I can't. People contact me and then I'm worried about following up with them, or why? And it's just, we hear the phrase, and I've deleted it completely from my vocabulary. That's just the way I am. Because there's no need for that to be true. I really believe change is absolutely always possible. We just have to make those decisions about that set of scales. Like with my daughter, I think now, I always tell this story, and she came home from nursery the day I had my last session. I had 3 sessions with a practitioner, and that was all for that issue. But the day that she came back from nursery after I had my 3rd session, and I didn't really do any more work than understanding the belief that I created, I just felt completely different. I just felt like I could properly see her, instead of everything else that I was projecting. And yes, she is full on, she is non-stop, and she is sometimes still a little ball of energy, and sometimes I still find that overwhelming, but in a much more proportionate way. And it's balanced by the fact that it's totally able to be easily affectionate. I just wasn't disconnected, and I haven't been ever since. And I just thought, if I didn't take responsibility for that, she could have grown up with a mother that was quite absent, really, quite withdrawn, and I wouldn't have understood it, and she wouldn't have understood it, and that would have then impacted her, and perhaps her daughter would have felt the same. So we can break those things and we don't need to know anything. I know for people who, I was in talking therapy for well, obviously my mum's illness was fairly tricky as we were growing up, so she passed away when I was 12, so I was in talking therapy for quite a long time, and it was really, really helpful. It was great. But like Denise was saying, I was still triggered. I grew up in an environment that was quite high alert at different times, so my triggers were quite there were many, and they appeared in different ways in my life. Now I wouldn't have been able to talk about that at one stage, and now I use it to talk to other people about what EFT can do, and I don't feel anything in my body. Those kind of channels are open, that emotion's been released, whereas my whole life for a very long time was about turning away from different triggers, and so that makes your world really small. So I do understand that it can feel really onerous, and people go, oh my goodness, going deep and talking about this stuff, especially this stuff that I've talked to death. I really relate to that. And as I said, 3 sessions, and I'm not suggesting that there is a prescribed amount of sessions, but just that those 3 sessions did more for me than 6 months of some of talking sometimes. I'm not saying absolutely talking therapy is very, very useful, and I'm very grateful to the counsellors and therapists that I was with. But I came to a point where some of these loops, it didn't matter what my mind thought, it was about what my body had stored. So this is a way through those. And no, you don't need to know anything except that there's something you want to change.
Our trauma triggers will show up, won't they? They just will keep showing us that your body wants something different. And I think the word that stood out for me as you were talking there is responsibility. And if you know that your response to something isn't what you desire it to be, then seek help to change it. Your ability to respond in any situation, like you with your daughter Jess, you knew something wasn't right, but you couldn't put your finger on it by just talking about it. But there were trauma triggers there. And so you took yourself and became responsible for the fact that you wanted to change something. You didn't know how it was going to change. You just knew that you desired that change. And I think that's something that I started working on a long time ago now. I don't even know how long ago it was, but a long time ago now, knowing that there were times when my responses were learned behaviour, and they were part of traumas I'd experienced through childhood. Now, my traumas, if I described them, wouldn't be the same as yours, but they would create a similar reaction in the body. And that reaction goes back to our amygdala and being stored by our amygdala, because she wants to keep us safe. She wants us to survive. She wants us to keep going on this planet. She doesn't understand that actually we'd like to keep going on this planet with much more ease and calm than we've experienced so far in our lives. But we can teach her that she doesn't have to. In Hagening, we use the analogy of the dog. So the dog that always jumps up can be trained to sit down. Amy doesn't need to, at the sign of any sort of stress or trauma trigger, to be constantly jumping up and demanding attention. Actually, we can teach her to sit. Oh, I usually jump. Oh, I don't need to jump up at this. Okay, I can sit, and I can have much more ease with the world around me and the world within me. So yeah, responsibility, brilliant word, love it. Anything else from your brain, Miss Blackford?
No, I'm just kind of like, I think it's all very interesting about how you've done all the thinking and talking that you can possibly do, and it's still not, I'm going to use the word fixed, if the problem is still not fixed, in inverted commas. You know, you can go to the body for answers, or not necessarily answers, but solutions. Again, probably not the best word. As one who likes to, think a lot, it's good to know that there's also another layer, that when that thinking doesn't get me where I want to go.
Yeah, there are many layers, and there are many modalities that start to shift things. I am going to just put this out there, but I think for me as an introvert, to go for something that is primarily a talking therapy doesn't work. I don't want to talk all the time. That doesn't work for me. It's exhausting. That could be way easier for an extrovert to tap into things. or someone with a more of an extrovert tendency. Whereas for me, it's like with havening, I don't have to speak. I can bring my amygdala down off alert using the havening touch technique. And this is where you were asking Sami about, do you need to know what you need to know? You just need to know that something's not okay, that something is being triggered, and that there are ways of using the EFT modalities, the havening modalities, any of those modalities that have some sort of touch as part of them, that you can access sensory information without having to know exactly where it came from. If this has come genetically through, then you weren't there when your grandmother was having a conversation. But if she encoded something that genetically is being passed on, then you just can work with the sensations. And I need that more. I'm very much more of that kinesthetic type. I know something's not right, but I don't know how to tell you what's not right. I just know it's not right. And so with havening, I found that I can work with that using the havening touch, using a very specific type of distraction, and I can bring my body off that high alert that Amy's triggering. And that's what I love about EFT and about my type of modality, is that if you're someone who just knows that you know that something's not right, then choose a modality like ours rather than somewhere where you've got to talk it through, because that might be very stressful for you to do. So that's my preference. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but it's just my preference to engaging with someone when I need a practitioner to look at me and and point out things that they notice that's going on, and then take the treatment, which I'm not supposed to use that word, but take what's another word for treatment, Jess? What would you say? The plan of action. The plan of action in a way that is being observed and fed back to me. So yeah, not all modalities are going to suit everyone. Sometimes you just have to try them on and see. And you just might go, actually, this isn't going to work for me. It doesn't sit well with me. I don't get a sense that I'm going to get anywhere. But that doesn't mean you give up. Just keep your ear to the ground. What are other people doing? How are they finding their way through their traumas in life? And traumas don't have to be massive. You don't have to be in full-on PTSD for a trauma to keep triggering you. If you go somewhere and there's an anxiety sensation comes up, then that's your body showing you that there's something here for you. You're not okay in this situation. You don't need to get to a point of digging through every single experience you've had over your lifetime to get to the right one. Often a therapy, a modality like ours, it just knocks the wall down really easily. It helps you out of the hole you're in, and it teaches you a way to walk around that hole or to step over that hole. There's no fear there anymore about that particular trigger. And then, like Jess said, she will give you personal care sheets. So if you still get that there is something that is being triggered, you can work on it by yourself, with yourself, so that you can really calm it right down. Some triggers, I believe, never fully leave, but that's just your amygdala staying alert. And once you understand that, you can go, hey, Amy, thanks. God, thanks for showing me that, because I could have gone into a full-blown trigger of some sort and had a panic attack. But you're showing me that there's something here I just need to be aware of. Okay, cool. Yeah, high five, Amy. Doing your job. You're doing a great job. And being grateful for that message rather than it escalating into full-on negativity and, oh my God, I'm the worst person in the world, or however you speak to yourself. It's just such a cool way to bring yourself back from the edge of concern, of worry, of frustration, of overwhelm. And I think everyone now, as I'm ranting again, can tell how much I love what I do, because I'm going to stop myself talking now.
So I feel like there's so much more we could say on the topic of EFT and how it works and the benefits it has. But let's move on to talking about business. Jess, you mentioned that your business is quite young. So can you tell us a bit about your business journey so far?
Yeah, it's my first time of being self-employed, so that's an interesting jump, isn't it? So I was working in the criminal justice system before I came to this, and then I was on maternity leave. So I worked in kind of victim support, and then I was on maternity leave, and I trained as a meditation and mindfulness teacher at first. And then in that kind of way that sometimes happens, I had found EFT because I had been a client of similar things, and I had the notion that I wanted to speak to somebody about EFT. And a friend of mine came to see me that week, and we went out for lunch, and she said, I've been thinking about training in EFT. And I said, have you? And we booked it, both of us, and trained together that day, that kind of week. And so I fell in love with the work, and I've stayed in love with the work. So it was a big leap, and anybody who's thinking of doing it, and I was in maternity, so it was you could say an easier or harder time to be doing something like that. I think that's always true, isn't it? No matter what your circumstances are. I would say one of my mantras these days is that fear is not a stop sign, and all the best things don't happen unless you have to shit yourself first. So So if you're thinking about it, and I know everybody's situation is different, but if it's possible for you, it's probably never going to happen without a bit of fear. So go for that. So quite quickly it moved, but then for me, it's been managing, which I've been a part of your mastermind program, which has been amazing for me, is all those things you don't expect. So I love being a practitioner, and I'm a confident practitioner. I believe that, when I'm in the room with somebody, I can hold that space and support them. And I've been able to do that part of it. Networking, marketing, finances, all the business stuff. And then, of course, as with any massive new venture that you do, I deal with it in parenthood, and you guys support people with it in business. All your mindset stuff comes up, all your blocks, all your triggers. So I think when you've got to wear all the hats, some of them are bound to be comfier than others. So yeah, get the support, especially if you're new to it like I was. I've come a long way doing the enrichment mastermind. So it's been really, really helpful for me.
That's what we like to hear. And I think it's we've talked about this a lot, and it's one of my bugbears is like people go into training in a therapy or a modality, whatever it might be, and they're taught their training and they're really good at whatever it is that they do, but they're not necessarily taught the business side of becoming a practitioner or becoming a therapist, becoming a coach, whatever it is. And that really annoys me. It's like these training programs need to have a bit about that as well, because I kind of feel like you kind of go through the training and you're pushed out the end. It's like, oh, off you go then. You go and set up a business, become a practitioner. I don't mean like it may not be quite like that. I'm overstating it, obviously. And I think there is, like you were saying before, if somebody's got an issue that they know is not right and they come to a practitioner for that guidance, I think the same is true with business, isn't it? It's like we can't be expected to just know what we're doing.
You think surely you do, like, because you just next step by next step. And I was lucky enough to have a trainer who did and she does workshops on your money mindset and how to set up your EFT business. And she does a bit of coaching about that. But for example, she can't do branding, Sami, like you. It's those kind of things. And then you'll need to speak on this, but like it goes back, doesn't it, to like, well, okay, well, what's your values then? And you don't start off like that. You start off going, well, I'd love to get, I love to have people coming to see me so that I can do EFT with them. And you're like, okay, but let's let's get into that a little bit more. And actually, what does that look like? Because when you start, you go, well, I want to be busy. Well, what is busy? How's it going to fit around your life? I've realized, towards the end of last year, I really burnt out because I think a lot of us probably when we start, we go hard And then, you haven't set a destination. So, and managing things alongside the rest of your life, it's got to be a journey, hasn't it? It's got to be something that you learn as you go. And as your business grows, because I do very little meditation teaching, I incorporate it into EFT, but EFT is what I do really now. And that certainly wasn't what I set out to do, but I love it. So as you come across those ups and downs and ins and outs, you need to, I think, and there's a lot out there that professes to do lots of things. You say it, don't you, when people tell you that they're going to give you a £10,000 month in 48 hours or something. And and yeah, there's a lot of that. And you are quite vulnerable to that, actually, when you start, I would say, when you start to realize. So I think you go from little rocket enthusiasm, which enthusiasm never goes, but then you start like, and it's a clear sky, isn't it? But then you start going, oh, what's this? What's that meteor? Like, what's going on? And so you need some guidance through that, I'd say. But I would do it. I was really happy with the way that I did it, which was I came to networking first. And then, because also I think this about a practitioner, and this is why I do a consultation, you need to know that these are your people. I was quite worried about networking as an introvert, particularly when I started the business. And I found my old vision board from last year, and on it said, go to 3 networking events, because I was quite worried about networking. But now I really look forward to it, because it's about finding your people. There are events that I wouldn't go back to. There are events that I wouldn't go to. And I'm sure that the people who prefer those perhaps wouldn't prefer the ones that I like to go to. And that's fine, isn't it? But it can really put you off. So I'd say when you're looking for something like coaching, like I did with the mastermind, then know the people and say go to networking and say, oh, these are my people. Perhaps don't go for one of those very beautifully packaged but insubstantial things that you can find pinging at you a lot when Facebook or YouTube realizes that you're a new business.
The Facebook algorithm.
So yeah, there's a real value in that, and knowing what you're gonna get, really, I suppose, because it's really about gelling and being able to, I mean, being coached as an introvert by introverts is very useful. We might come across slightly different difficulties than extrovert coaching.
Yeah. And this is a huge generalization. Obviously, I haven't looked into it in any detail. I think a lot of those 10K in 10 days, I don't know if anybody does 10K in 10 days, but that's the phrase that we always use. Those sorts of packages, coaches, I think they are more on the extroverted side from my experience of what I've seen of other coaches online. And I'm not saying it's not possible to get to 10K in 10 days. I don't think it's sustainable, which for me, what I want is a sustainable business. It's not like you say going to burn me out after however many months or years, and that's going to fit in with my life. Because I would imagine to hit that 10K in 10 days, it's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take, full-time hours plus. And it's like, that's just not what I want. I don't want to put in that much effort in that short space of time. And I think it's important, like you say, to know what it is that you want, as in like the big dream, big goal type thing, and also in the day-to-day, what do you want your life to look like? And how's that business going to fit in and support that?
Yeah, and how are you going to, I think something that I struggled with a lot, and do to a degree, but I've got my tools now. So again, it might not be something that comes that naturally to me, but I can refer back and figure out where my next steps are, is communicating that to other people. I think a lot of the time, maybe especially as introverts, we don't always shout from the rooftops in such a way. So I don't think I kind of went into a relationship with social media that I've broken up with. We've
all been there, Jess. We've all been there.
It was a good decision. I don't miss it. So I think you got to like live and learn with that. And so for some people, social media is fantastic, but being comfortable about how you're communicating and what you're communicating and who you're actually talking to as well. All those kinds of questions, because it's really easy to go, I just love EFT and I just want to share it. And actually, I don't think there's a person on the planet who couldn't benefit. but who am I really talking to? Who are my people who are going to identify with me? And I think those are the things, really getting into those things that you don't always know when you start. And also trying to work everything out in a go is one thing. So I would recommend doing something a bit longer term. I think the 6-month kind of program was perfect because it gives you time to bed in those changes so that they become not something that you learn on a 5-day course that you then no one remembers anything, not anything, but everything they learn on a 5-day course. So what it does is you learn it bit by bit so that you can bed in those things into your business, into your life, and often into yourself as well. Because, when you're looking at things like what your fears are, that extends way beyond your business most of the time, a bit like we were talking about with unconscious beliefs. And then you can really make those things habits and patterns so that actually your business looks different at the end. Not, I'm now trying to plaster loads of stuff on after a week and I feel more overwhelmed than I did when I started.
We are very much at the influence, aren't we, of what we see on social media. And it's that whole thing of we can get a bit carried away. These people who have very successful businesses appear to have done it overnight. The 10K in 10 days. It does happen. And people make more than that. But they do it in the 10 days. And then what about the following 10 days? And things like that. And sustainability is a big thing for Sami and I, is that having the energy to keep going forward without the burnout. It's so easy to burn out because you're just running all the time. And then you end up running on empty. Not just with your business, but there's your life as well and your own health and well-being. So thanks for coming on the course. Thanks for choosing us and everything you're saying. I just want to ask, was there any one thing that you took away from that 6 months that is going to sustain you going forward, Jess?
Well, actually, a lot. I mean, things for me look really different now. But I suppose really because it was longer term, and because it was such a pivotal point for me in my business where I was just kind of, I would described it as like, a cartoon cannonball. So I'd set off and I'd done about 7 or 8 successful months, and I flew into the beginning of it, and then I started to hit those places of shit, how do I do this? Or okay, I've got this much, but how do I make it more? And how much time do I need? And actually, I'm working all the time. What's going on here? And so as I went through those pivotal points, I was able to look at those different aspects of things and think, well, what might be different? So I think what I took from it, and actually I think it would be really difficult to go through those things without having some kind of support there, is it will go up, it will go down, and it will go up again. So kind of hold on. And also there's that sense of community of well, actually, that'll always be true. We have different ups and different downs, and we get comfortable with that fact that there's ups and downs. But I think, especially if you're out of employment, or perhaps you've kind of had your business as a side with your employment, and now you're leaping into doing it, meeting those ups and downs, you realize, a bit like we were talking about with EFT, how full your toolkit is. And the likelihood is it's probably really full for social media, but not at all full for managing your work-life balance or working out actually what you are completely avoiding so much that it never even crosses your mind. You need somebody else to do that for you because you're resisting that for a reason. So it shines light gently on those kind of things, but then we don't just want the light, do we? Because that's, we're then left with a lot of things. It also gives you ways to move through them and know those ways and tools and put more tools in for the next time.
Just going back to when I started my own business, which is over 20 years ago now, in a different format, but started a business, I didn't understand that what I required was business support because I'd been employed. I was a nurse, I became a mother, and then I learned nutrition. And there was no concrete business support at the end of the study. And I eventually just went on to do another modality, thinking I needed to know more from a different modality. I didn't. I needed business support. I didn't understand how to work out how much to charge. It's just something as simple as that. I didn't understand that what I wanted my business to support me with. How much money did I require to live if I was on my own and wasn't reliant on my husband's salary to keep me going? Things like that. I wasn't taught any of that. And that's where Sami and I wanted to create this mastermind with that longevity for the people on the course, so that they could get as much out of it as they possibly could. But also, you've now got tools in a more of a business support toolkit that you didn't have before. We wanted to bring something together that, especially for therapists, practitioners, coaches, that was sustainable for them. We were not making any promises about how much money you'll make. That's over to you to implement what you've learned, to work out what is the lifestyle you desire. How many hours can you actually work? Have you ever sat down and thought about it? If you've come from employment where you might have had a 9-to-5 job, suddenly you're like, oh, I had a salary, and actually, how much do I want to make so that initially I earn a living, and then I can go beyond that? How do I do the numbers? How do I figure this out? And that's when your whole belief system comes back in, your worthiness comes to the fore. Like, who am I to charge what I charge? Who do I think I am? Who's going to come to me? But people do, because A, you know your modality, but B, you also know what's required for you to live. And I think that's where I got it wrong for so many years. I just kept adding a different modality in, thinking that that would make me more attractive. It just made it more confusing. I didn't know who or what my niche was about. I had no idea. And I didn't understand like that as some sort of habit that I set up. And so until I eventually learned it over the years, it took a lot longer than the 6 months that we created a course from, I can tell you. And now bringing all that experience together is what Sami and I wish to put out there in the world. Please don't struggle. Come on a course like this and find that there's nothing wrong with you. You just don't have the information. And the other thing I think is there's so much free information online that it gets really messy. It just you ricochet from one free thing to the next, but there's no actual support there in the freebie. It's just information. And then what do you do with that? You're not held accountable. You don't take ownership of that information because you don't really understand what you're going to do with it. So that was all part of what we wanted to create.
There is never a lack of information availability, is there, with the internet? And I think where we can come unstuck in our businesses and in any other area of our life is the implementation. Like, it's not an information problem, it's an implementation problem. And I think that's where we require the support. Like you were saying earlier, Jess, about EFT. Get a guide, get a practitioner to help you through it, because that is when having somebody that you know is there, kind of has got your back and is rooting for you, and there if you have a question, if you have a problem that you've come across, if something's come up, there's somebody there. And I think that's what, personally, in my experience, having worked with business coaches in the past, that's what I've found beneficial.
I just want to go back to accountability. Hands up, I'm a pleaser out there, and having taking ownership of something so that I can go back to someone and go, I've done this. Really works for me. So we are very different like that, you and I, Sami, but that works as well. So having that understanding of how different personalities, how different thought patterns are created, again, that's something we bring into the program. So you're not right, you're not wrong. It's what works for you. Yeah, we just want to dispel things that appear to be the norm, but actually are they? What's going to work for you?
And to pick on the 10K 10 days again, which I don't even know if it is a thing. I've always been the person that, like, £10,000 means nothing to me. I mean, obviously I know what it is and it's quite a lot of money, but it doesn't motivate me in any way. Like 10K in 10 days, I more see that's a lot of work in 10 days to reach that than 10K in 10 days. And part of what really worked in the mastermind is, what is it that motivates you?
And I think you're definitely right, or it's been my experience with myself and lots of other practitioners I know, that because what you're doing is about supporting people, it's really hard when you have to put a price on that. Equally, if you don't, what you're going to do is end up working every single hour for free. So your whole kind of the beginning of what was it all for in the end, because I would have been finding things more difficult than I would have if I'd have stayed employed, which, there's lots of reasons why we start our business. And there is a balance that we can strike that allows us to support people, and to support people also who might be finding things difficult financially, whilst also allowing ourselves to take what we need from putting that work out there as well. That's incredibly hard, and I would say I need support with that, and definitely needed support with that, and definitely benefited from that, and definitely from one of the things that you said, actually, because I found it so sometimes, and it sounds silly to say, again, it's about our unconscious beliefs. It feels distasteful to talk about that kind of stuff when you're talking about support, but you're actually also talking about a business, and you're actually also talking about physical work that you're doing in a day, hours of work. So it definitely helps to go, what do I want the outcome to be? What do I want the work to be that I'm doing? And how do I want that to fit in my life? It's that thing, isn't it, about, okay, yeah, I'm here to work for my business, but how can my business work for me as well? How is that going to look in my world? Because part of the reason I started was because my kids are really small, and I was working all across Cheshire, so I could have been in Macclesfield and finding it difficult to get back, and just all over the place. And so for me, balance was a big part of that. But I found that immediately I overbalanced, working as many hours as I possibly could. So yeah, all of those things. And perhaps, as you say, Sami, particularly finance and money mindset, when you are talking about therapists and practitioners, that's a generalization, but anecdotally in my circles, it's true. We find that a bit of a tricky balance to strike. And I'd say as well, with the mastermind, you've got each month which is themed differently. So you might look at money 1 month, but that could be a whole series of sessions in itself as well. You could get deeper and deeper into that and have your courses coming off of that. And I don't think it's a bit like we were saying about, you never get rid of all of your triggers. I don't think you'd ever finish finding value in exploring those things.
So, Sami, are you going to say it?
Well, I feel like, again, there's so much more we can say. Before I say it, I'm going to put another advert break in. Denise, no, not your Denise. Jess. Denise, we don't need to know about you.
No.
Jess, remind us where people can find you.
You can find me at breatheasymeditation.co.uk, and you will find all my social media links there. You will find the Not a Perfect Parent community. You will find the podcast, and you will find lots of places where you can book in for a free chat with me. And if you just want to go ahead and get in touch, you can email me at jess@breatheasymeditation.co.uk, and I will talk your ear off about EFT.
And that's why I say to people, your website is your biggest asset, because that has links to everything else. Otherwise, you'll be like, you can find me here, there, and there. Just go to the website, everything's there. So, Denise, are we done?
Jess, are we done?
I think I'll just say that for anybody considering doing the mastermind, I'd really recommend it. I think there's a lot of passion in it. It's built with a lot of love and a lot of experience. And so I think if you are finding yourself a bit unsure, just go for it. I don't think you're gonna you're not going to regret it. There's definitely a lot to explore and a lot to learn. And also, I think I've got all my resources and I think I can keep going back to those. And as I grow, my business grows, I can keep learning from those resources as well. So I would definitely recommend getting involved in the community and also definitely the mastermind if you're lucky enough to have the opportunity.
Thank you.
Well, I think that's a great point to end on.
Yeah, before our brains go off, spiraling off in lots of other directions. Jess, thank you so much for agreeing to be a guest, our first guest on our podcast. We're delighted you said yes. Thank you for everything you've said today. Really, really appreciate it. Sami, I think we are done now, aren't we?
We are done.
We are done. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to Talking to Introverts, and we'll be back with you in a couple of weeks. Bye for now.